More and more, like many gamers, I find myself scratching my head at how and why things are the way they are. Often pondering questions like, why did Concord get made? Why did Battlefield 2042 get pushed out as a hunk of garbage? Why do devs insist on shoving SBMM down our throats? Why are Asmongold and Hassan both competing for sexiest man alive? With of course honorable mention to S-Fan. I see you putting in that work, King. No one knows the answer to these things. And one of the head scratchers I had, one of the burning questions of the universe, was for the highly critically acclaimed IP of Titanfall. Why didn't Titanfall 3 get made? And why did Respawn Entertainment decide to make Apex Legends instead? On the surface, this story might sound mundane, and I thought so too, until I started digging, and what I found instead was a story full of attempts at actual espionage, accusations of IP theft, really bad timing, jealousy, lawsuits, hackers, counter-hackers, red hat double agent hackers, and most shockingly, a situation where Electronic Arts was somehow less of an asshole than someone else in the room. But that someone else was Bobby Kotick. Hey everyone, my name is Onepeg. I'm a streamer and content creator on Twitch and YouTube, and I make investigative journalism pieces like this from time to time when one of these lingering questions presents itself. If you like this kind of content and want to see more of it, maybe click the subscribe button, and hey, the bell, if you're feeling frisky. Before we talk about half of Titanfall's IP getting tossed into a dumpster faster than Bastion at the start of the never-ending story, we have to first understand how it began in order to understand where it went wrong. And for the purposes of me covering my legal tush-tush here, I'm gonna say that any information included in this video is alleged. Respawn Entertainment and Titanfall, a fledgling IP that started back in 2010. Maybe fledgling isn't really the right word here though, because the founders of Respawn Entertainment were these two guys, Vince Zampella and Jason West. Maybe you've heard of them? If not, let me help you out. They're responsible for creating a small indie dev studio called Infinity Ward, and are the co-creators of a small indie FPS game called Call of Duty. I assume that you guys are familiar with Call of Duty, right? Zampella and West are the co-founders, executive producers, and lead designers for the original Call of Duty 1 and 2 and Modern Warfare 1 and 2, the first 4 games of the Call of Duty franchise. Hey Barbara, let me introduce you to these two fellers over here. You ever heard of Christianity before? Yeah, these two guys over here, their names are God and Jesus. They made this whole religion. Isn't that neat? The 4 Call of Duty titles that Zampella and West were responsible for generated an estimated $2 billion in sales, with the first Call of Duty title being published by Activision, who at the time had a 30% stake, fully acquiring Infinity Ward in 2003. This means that 98% of COD's revenue was Activision's income, and this is where things started to go sideways. Zampella and West contested that with the abundance of sales generated by the IP that they, the creators, were being shortchanged. They wanted more money. They, in their mind, deserved a greater income for generating a game that set records for the entire games industry. To give you a comparison here, Grand Theft Auto 4, which came out the year before, did $500 million in its first 2 weeks. Modern Warfare 2 doubled GTA 4's sales figures and set a new benchmark in the same time frame at $1 billion. That's like Mark Spitz. He's like this really famous Olympic swimmer from back in the day. He got 9 gold medals at the Olympics. But Michael Phelps has 23 gold medals and got 8 gold medals in a single Olympics. In 2010, that is the difference between Modern Warfare 2's sales numbers and everyone else. For years, Zampella and West believe they're left out in the cold while they watch Activision dive around in the Scrooge McDuck money bin, and they start getting vocal about it. They voice their concerns across both Modern Warfare titles that are now responsible for over $1.5 billion in sales, and Activision kinda just sits back and says, well, your contract is your contract, boys, get out there and make us another banger. So, Zampella and West, realizing that Activision doesn't want to play ball, start looking outside of Activision for other opportunities. At this point in our story, there are probably 2 schools of thought that you guys are leaning into. The first is that Zampella and West had no idea they would generate such an amazing title, so how could they know to try to negotiate a contract for better bonuses than what they already negotiated? Although the bonus structure really doesn't look that bad on paper. Furthermore, it would be in Activision's best interest to consider renegotiation in order to keep these two guys happy as the golden geese that they were. But the other side of this fence would be to say that Activision put up a lot of initial cash investing in the future of an IP they weren't sure would make good on the money. And now they're just reaping the reward of a rather risky investment decision, and well, Zampella and West agreed to the contract they signed, and that's on them for not negotiating something better. Too bad, so sad. Now, I'm honestly not sure which one of these is the right way to think about it. After all, Bobby Kotick is an asshole. But part of me is kind of leaning toward the contract was the contract. I should say, as I researched this, there ended up being slightly more to this income bit, but we'll revisit that in a minute. Zampella and West end up butting heads with Activision's management for the last year or so of Modern Warfare 2's development. Activision, suspecting something is up, and honestly looking for a reason to fire Zampella and West, start investigating the pair. Now, I can't make this next part up. I wish I could, but I can't. And like a 2013 Tumblr blogger living out their spy movie fan fiction, Activision codenames this investigation Project Icebreaker in response to what Activision stated was, and I'm quoting here, insubordinate and self-serving schemers who attempted to hijack Activision's assets for their own personal gain. Bobby Kotick, CEO of Activision, by way of George Rose, Chief Legal Officer at Activision, requested that Senior Director of IT, Thomas Fennedy, hack into the email accounts, voicemails, and computer files of Zampella and West and I quote here again, dig up dirt, but don't get caught doing it. Fennedy balked at the task, but decided to toe the line, asking Microsoft and IT security firm InGuardians for assistance. They both refused unless Fennedy could supply a court order. Fennedy even went so far as to toy with the idea of having, and again I can't make this up, a mock fire drill in order to get Zampella and West away from their PCs long enough to image their hard drives. Activision and Fennedy ultimately testify they did none of those things, but you have to wonder, if they were going to those lengths, what did they do? Well, somehow Activision executives found out that Zampella and West had been chatting with EA about leaving Infinity Ward to make a new IP. But this was not likely the only motivation for their firing. By the way, Activision fired both of these guys. Like, they literally showed up to go to work one morning and security wouldn't let them in the door. But let's go back and talk about motivations. For starters, it appeared that Activision was making a play to not pay out the bonuses that Infinity Ward was owed. In an article written by Paul Sandler, a now lead designer with NetEase and a former Infinity Ward team member, Sandler writes that once they fired Zampella and West, they had a group meeting with the remaining 100 or so Infinity Ward devs, where an Activision executive said, "Guys, if you stay with the studio and make Modern Warfare 3, you will receive your Modern Warfare 2 bonuses, and we will also give everyone a 50% salary increase." That is a 5 and a 0. 50%. Sandler then goes on to state that when the mood in the room didn't change, the executive then said, and I quote, "Look, I get it. I know this is a tough situation, but just take the money and get over it." The guy actually used the words "get over it." This one conversation ended up being pretty important because Activision started planting seeds that if you left the company for any reason, you would not be getting your bonuses. Due to the $1 billion in sales of Modern Warfare 2, overshooting any estimate of success with the IP, the worst bonus estimate for the lowest man on the totem pole at Infinity Ward was $1.1 million, with Zampella and West looking at around $20 million each. Conservative estimates put the bonuses owed for the entire team at over $200 million. Over the next several weeks after this meeting, another 40 people or so of the 100-man dev team quit. Zampella and West were fired on March 1st of 2010. They started Respawn Entertainment with EA as its primary investor 1 month later on April 12th of 2010. 2 years later, in 2012, the Infinity Ward employee group, comprised of 38 former employees, was paid an estimated $42 million settlement, and the case was closed. So Zampella and West opened the studio in 2010 and decide that they're going after Activision and Call of Duty. Up until now, Call of Duty had a single-player campaign and a multiplayer option, but Zampella decides that Titanfall needs to try to take COD down, and the place that COD shines is on the multiplayer side. By the time the original Titanfall debuts in 2014, you already had an abundance of COD trick shots, ill cams from FaZe and associated highlight reels in the early years of YouTube, and the peak of Vine. The world of gaming had shifted toward multiplayer first-person shooters and their attention like never before. And the objective for Titanfall was to steal away the Call of Duty audience Zampella and West had created. Naturally, the focus for Titanfall had to be a unique multiplayer experience. Zampella and West make a bold move. They decide the entirety of Titanfall is going to be focused solely on multiplayer lobbies, and it worked. On its launch in 2014, Titanfall's only online multiplayer game sold 7 million copies and was met with critical acclaim from both critics and players alike. This odd mix of, even though you sit in a pilot seat running around with a mech all day, still means you're athletic as fuck, alongside of Titans that you could tailor with different styles of loadouts while you fragged away on the battlefield, gave a sense like nothing other at the time. Inside of the mechs, you weren't as agile as the mechs were in games like Hawken or Armored Core, but outside the mech, you still got to pretend that you were a rabid ferret on meth if you wanted to, with the game's combination of double jumps, wall running, boost sliding, and comboing these things with the right perks that just made you fly around the battlefield. It gave the movement gamers the ability to showcase their skills, and the people that did better playing a little slower found a home in the mech-based combat where it was more about tactics and team play than it was about flicks. Overall, the gamers were into it, even though the price tag was $60 and even though the lobbies were only 12 players. Imagine trying to sell that game now for $60. Oof. Regardless, critical acclaim, high scores, Respawn blows it out of the water, EA is super happy, and EA acquires Respawn for $151 million in cash and some $160 million in equity shareholdings of EA stock. Zampella and West throw a kegger like nothing anyone's ever seen before and put up a picture and throw darts at Bobby Kodak's face. Alright, that last bit I just made up, but my headcanon would like to believe that that's true. I mean, the part about the money is absolutely real, but the kegger and the darts, not so much. 2.5 years later, in 2016, Titanfall 2 releases, but things don't go as well this time around, and the resulting aftermath and the decisions that get made nearly cripple Respawn Entertainment and their entire body of work. Titanfall 2 gets, again, nothing but praise from critics and gamers alike. This time, Titanfall decides to include a well-scripted, dramatic, and engaging single-player campaign that shapes the sci-fi universe surrounding the pilots, their titans, and the struggle between two major warring factions. If you haven't played this campaign, I highly recommend you do. And for the sake of not spoiling anything, I'll just say seriously, just play it. It's awesome. Like, Crytek Crisis awesome. They polish the multiplayer experience with larger lobbies that can handle more players. There's even greater movement tech, more game modes, and the mechs have even more variation and options. The game still retails for $60, but as a content buy, people got significantly more bang for their buck than the original Titanfall game's offering. Today, people looking back on Titanfall 2's content refer to the game saying things like, it's a masterpiece, the best multiplayer experience we've had in the last decade. Respawn know how to make a damn good video game, and the praise continues. Until you start looking at all of the hacking, but we'll get there in a second. First, if Titanfall 2 was received so well, what went wrong? Titanfall 2 didn't break any sales records when it came out. In fact, it undersold the original Titanfall title, doing about 60% of Titanfall's sales numbers in the same period of time. Titanfall 1 earned an estimated $500 million in sales, but in its first weeks, Titanfall 2 only earned somewhere around $300 million. But if the game had been reviewed so well, why didn't it sell well? 4 words: Battlefield 1 and Bobby Kotick. Well, maybe that's 5 words. Does the word "and" count there? It's debatable. Anyway, Electronic Arts' marquee shooting game has always been the large theater of war Battlefield series. Battlefield 1942 debuted a year before Call of Duty's first game. From there, you have Battlefield Vietnam, BF2, the second best Battlefield game ever, and I will fight you all on this, Battlefield 2142, Battlefield Bad Company, Battlefield 1943, the GOAT of all Battlefield games, Battlefield Bad Company 2, BF3, BF4, Battlefield Hardline, and by the time Titanfall 2 is set to release, EA is looking to release Battlefield 1, a World War I battlefield simulator. But I use the word simulator here really loosely. It's a Battlefield game. Battlefield 1 was pushed hard by EA Games. Trailers, marketing, big media push. It's estimated that the push for this game would have been similar to Battlefield 3 at somewhere around $50 million in advertising spend. The idea from EA's brass was to release the game just before the big holiday push hit. Then, when EA does its historic winter sales event, Titanfall will be right there, offering a bit of a crossover opportunity for gamers that loved Battlefield's large-scale war stage to that of Titanfall's more arcadey, futuristic, and faster-paced feel. Battlefield 1 released on October 21st, 2016, and sold approximately 4 million units in its first couple of weeks. In total, it's estimated that Battlefield 1, over its entire lifetime, generated somewhere in the ballpark of $400 million in sales, with $300 million of that coming in the first few weeks of its lifespan. Titanfall 2 released just 7 days later, on October 28th. On the other side of this sandwich is a jaded Bobby Kotick. By way of the legal system, Zampella and West got a rare opportunity to show Bobby Kotick what a bad dog he was being for shitting on the carpet, and they got to rub his nose in it, and Kotick hadn't forgotten. I'm gonna paint a little picture for you guys here. A Picasso, if you will. Activision sees Titanfall making headlines, and they know the commercial success and purchase of Respawn means they're making another one. They'd be stupid not to. Activision announces this new 3-year development cycle in February 2014, and following the release of Modern Warfare 3, the remaining guys at Infinity Ward are slated to make Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. If you're unfamiliar with Infinite Warfare, I'll give you a synopsis. Let me know if this checks off any Titanfall boxes for you. The game is played in the far future, where interstellar travel is possible. While the single-player campaign is more space-oriented, the multiplayer focus, while having kill streaks, which they now call score streaks, also includes wall running, double jumps with a boost pack, boost sliding, and the inclusion of rigs, which are exoskeleton-like suits with special abilities. While you didn't have the Titan call down at your fingertips for that dope-as-fuck superhero landing, you basically got Titanfall pilot mechanics in a Call of Duty battle arena. Infinite Warfare's release was on November 4th, 1 week after Titanfall 2's debut. I don't know about you, but this reads an awful lot like Kotick wanted to remind the boys at Respawn who ruled what roost, and after the shenanigans that came out in the court documents in the years following Activision's firing of West and Zampella, it comes as no surprise to me that Activision spent an amount of money nearly equivalent to what was paid to the former developers in settlement money on Infinite Warfare's ad campaign. Nearly $40 million. Titanfall 2's release was sandwiched between the latest and greatest releases of the two largest shooting game franchises in the world. If this were a presidential election, Titanfall 2 sounds a lot like Ross Perot, but it didn't get reviewed that way. For PS4, Xbox, and PC, Battlefield 1 Metacritic scores were 88, 87, and 89, with a user score of 7.9 out of 10. Infinite Warfare's Metacritic scores 77, 78, and 73, with a user score of 4.3 out of 10. Players hated Infinite Warfare. Titanfall 2's Metacritic scores 89, 89, and 86, with a user score of 8.1 out of 10. Titanfall 2 scored higher on every conceivable metric but sales. Why? They didn't get any ad play. The only ads that were really running at the time to push Titanfall 2 out to fans were from Xbox general spending ads that were playing at the time. We can assume that EA also pushed out some advertisements for Titanfall 2 specifically, but Xbox's ad spend, which included Titanfall 2, Madden 17, Forza Horizon 3, FIFA 17, and Gears of War in September of 2016, totaled approximately $22 million. It's believed that Titanfall 2 probably somewhere around got roughly a quarter of the ad push that these other two giants got. And for all of that push in its first weeks, Battlefield 1, $300 million. Infinite Warfare, $260 million. Titanfall 2, with its tiny-ass ad spend budget sandwiched between two giants of the industry, $300 million, and higher reviewed Metacritic scores across the board than both of the other titles. Imagine what would have happened if the ad budget was higher. Because Titanfall 2 undersold the original Titanfall, people were melancholy. Technically, it had done great, considering the competition it was pitted against, but numerically, it wasn't the blockbuster that EA and Respawn had hoped for. This led to a strategic shift. Respawn toyed with the idea of making Titanfall 3 for the better part of a year, ultimately deciding that what they were working on wasn't innovative enough, but they saw an opportunity. There was even talk of a spin-off project for Asian markets. EA announced a partnership with Nexon back in 2016 to create Titanfall Online, but this project during beta test phases in 2017 was not being met positively and was ultimately canceled. I'm going to come back to this Titanfall Online thing in a second, so keep that in the back of your mind. During the year that followed Titanfall 2's launch, the market shifted to focus on Battle Royale style games. The house that H1Z1 built had, by the end of 2017, Fortnite Battle Royale with its cartoonish approach to the genre at 1 million concurrent players, and PUBG with its more realistic approach saw an absolutely insane user count of 3.2 million concurrent players. They were playing at the same time. There were hundreds of millions of gamers playing BR games, and millions playing every second of every day, and Respawn saw an opportunity. Rather than include the mech style of combat, they decided to shift their IP to one in where the pilots on foot with their special abilities would battle it out BR style in small 3-man parties. They'd utilize the familiar grenade and weapon tech that they were known for with Titanfall, keeping all the same weapon names even, and over its development would create a series of champions that all had their own special, unique abilities and archetypes. This was something that BR games had not seen before. And with that, Apex Legends released on February 4th, 2019. Apex has seen player counts estimated in the millions, and as of May 2024, EA reported that the game, the IP, had generated more than $3.4 billion in revenue. By the time Titanfall 2 released, the original Titanfall had already become a thing of the past, with its last content update being just 5 months after its original release date. These content additions were free. Titanfall 2, staying true to form, also released several free content additions, but didn't add to the single-player campaign. Nowadays, we all know that online service games have ongoing costs, and that's why there's things like premium currency and microtransactions in video games. And I think if this was announced today, the cynic in me automatically would have said, hold the fuck on, this is going to become abandonware. And in the years that followed, Titanfall 2 fans began to feel this in droves. Once Respawn's development shifted hard into Apex Legends creation, Titanfall 2 had a fall off of support. And as the years progressed into Apex Legends and its release date, players felt as if Titanfall 2 was just left behind. Completely unresolved were many desync problems and netcode issues. Maps had exploited out-of-bounds areas, and the most egregious of all were a series of exploits that, once found, were severe enough to render anyone and everyone completely incapable of playing the multiplayer game at all. If you're wondering, yeah, this is where I'm going to start talking about the hackers, and this part is involved. There were multiple exploits in Titanfall 2 that people were taking advantage of. Simple things like having a name that was extremely long would cause servers to crash as it tried to read every character in your name. There were then, of course, other more nefarious means that were being brought about by these coders. Enter a guy that goes by the name of Gene Yu, or Juno. I don't know how you pronounce his name, but we're just going to call him Gene Yu because that's the way Upper Echelon called it. By mid-2020, Gene Yu was the kind of hacking nuisance in Titanfall 2 that became his own internet urban legend. Gene Yu was real, and he was causing server crashes. But like Minecraft kids calling out the name of Hero Brine, if anything glitch or otherwise in the game went wrong, it half-jokingly, half-frighteningly became Gene Yu's fault. Light was shed on this person by a user that went by the name of P0358, or Poe for short, alongside several other self-proclaimed white hat or good guy hackers going by the names of Mr. Steak, Red Shield, owner of a Titanfall-centric Discord called Remnant Fleet, and a coder named Dogecore. Poe gained somewhat of a cult celebrity status on the Titanfall subreddit. This notoriety leads to attention from different news outlets like IGN, where he mentions that he's working tirelessly to uncover the precise exploits Gene Yu was using to disrupt the game. Poe even goes so far as to write a Medium article where he lists in detail most of the exploits he's aware of and states publicly how to counteract them, including known player IDs of people who he says are hacking in the game with a mere "trust me, bro," and also mentions that he could fix all of this in a few days if they'd hire him. Smile. He also makes sure to mention his PayPal address in case anyone would like to tip him for his work in trying to fix Titanfall. All of this on the surface seems innocuous, but it leads to a larger sum. Over time, beginning somewhere around late 2018 or early 2019, the attacks on the servers and the exploits get worse. In early 2021, Respawn Week tweets that the company is aware of the DDoS attacks affecting Titanfall and that help is coming ASAP. But it didn't come ASAP. It got worse. Shortly following the "we're working on it" tweet from Respawn, Red Shield, the Discord server owner guy, ends up doing an interview chiming in on the issues surrounding GNU and Titanfall with Eurogamer, where the article cites Red Shield, an outsider, someone that doesn't work for Respawn, as an expert on what's going on with Titanfall, where he states, among other things, at the end of the article, and I quote, "I ask that Respawn solves the issue permanently by giving us access and control over the Titanfall 1 servers with permission to moderate, ban users, and if I can be so bold, mod the game." Respawn has expressed interest in this idea in the past, and of all the solutions to the exploits and player retention problems, community-run servers are the strongest. Now, for those of you that have been keeping score, at this point, Red Shield and Poe, two of the 4 self-proclaimed white hats, have both openly at this point lobbied to either get jobs or gain control of Titanfall. Don't worry, it gets weirder. While GNU is apparently causing so much bad traffic on servers that people are completely unable to play Titanfall 1 and forces Titanfall 1 to basically die, he works up a hacking methodology that is so sophisticated that he's able to blacklist other people from ever being able to play Titanfall 2 multiplayer ever again, which he calls the atomic bomb, and everyone else refers to it as the blacklist. This attack is so sophisticated that if you switched your IP with a VPN, if you switched accounts, if you switched to a console, even if you switched your geographic location somehow, or any combination of these things, somehow this bot network was able to find you and kick you out of a game in mere minutes to seconds. You could not hide from the blacklist once you were on the blacklist. This was in addition to consistent and constant DDoS attacks that had already been ongoing. I mean, like, at this point, I gotta just stop and ask, what the fuck is Respawn doing? This had been going on at this point since early 2019, late 2018. It was now early 2021. And this still hadn't been resolved. All signs basically point to this being nothing shy of abandonware in light of the studio's new favorite child, Apex Legends. Even weirder yet, Poe is having candid conversations with people like Upper Echelon at this point in time, talking about how the game engine that Titanfall and Apex are built on is garbage, its netcode is garbage, full of exploits, and that the engine is something that people could abuse to cause other people to crash, but goes on to say that the Apex side was not just GNU hacking because Apex has, and I quote, more hackers than Titanfall does. He doesn't elaborate on how exactly he knows this, and mentions to Upper Echelon that Respawn should just hand over the keys to the kingdom so that these guys can community run the servers and fix all the exploits. Another talk about how they want to have control. The blacklist begins to grow in infamy as GNU would appear in the chats of Twitch streamers streaming the game, and if you annoyed him, pissed him off, or if he was just feeling silly that day, he would add you to his blacklist and you weren't able to play multiplayer ever again. If there's a surefire way to murder a game, it's to make sure that you take out the guys marketing it, i.e. streamers. And by this point in time, in early 2021, the only people making content about Titanfall 2 didn't have anything to do with strats or exploits or builds. It was all about the hacking that was keeping people from being able to play it at all. While people are being blacklisted left and right, servers are being brought to their knees, while Titanfall 1 and 2 are nigh unplayable, the hacker or hackers drop their swan song. They take Apex Legends and all of the Titanfall servers offline on the 4th of July 2021 via a sophisticated botnet DDoS attack and are able to manipulate the login screen message for Apex Legends to read, "Visit and repost savetitanfall.com," a website that now is only accessible using web archive sites since the site is down, which included a 40-page PDF document called Operation Red Tape, authored by a guy named Wanty. That was a collection of administrator-level permission conversations taken from primarily the Discord owned by the white hat hacker Red Shield, and whose admins included the entire white hat hacker group. All of the servers for all of the Respawn Entertainment IPs are locked down for 2 full days. On the Remnant Fleet Discord, the Discord owned by this Red Shield guy, Poe immediately makes an announcement stating that they are in no way responsible for the hacks that occurred, but the Red Tape document paints a completely different picture. See, Poe and Red Shield had been going out of their way to try to portray themselves as the good guys. Titanfall was the damsel in distress, and they were here to save the day. However, the PDF document outlines in excruciating, painstaking detail about how all of these white hat hackers were actually directly discussing and outright testing methodologies to make the 4th of July hack happen just the way they had planned. There are hundreds of screenshots that were taken to show Poe speaking with the hacker group about how easy it would be to take down the servers, and shows him being outright vitriolic when speaking about Apex, Titanfall, and Respawn. Excerpts like Red Shield saying, quote, "We are in the middle of committing a major cyber crime against your favorite AAA blockbuster. We are the most trustworthy people on the internet." And Poe saying they deserve every single thing they get. At this point, it's believed that there isn't actually a Gene U. There are even old archived screen caps of Poe impersonating Gene U. So it's now believed that Gene U is either Poe, they are one and the same, or Gene U is the entire group of hackers all pretending to be Gene U. But why? Well, here's the interesting tie-in. Remember when I mentioned Titanfall Online? That project was officially canceled in July of 2018. The first Titanfall 2 exploits that started to get toyed with began cropping up shortly after this time. The Red Tape document ends up stating that the coders hacking the hell out of the server infrastructure for Titanfall and Apex were doing it to kill Titanfall. Their objective was to ruin the IP's overall sentiment from the players to where no one wanted to play either game anymore, and Respawn would have no choice but to resurrect the Titanfall Online project, of which it's believed that Poe and the other coders had a hand in developing directly as outsourced coders working with Nexon on the project. Like, I know that the pickup artist method is to lightly put down women in an attempt for them to take the engagement bait, but I'm not sure if that works on nerds with their very expensive multi-million-dollar server infrastructure and multi-billion-dollar IPs. That one probably isn't gonna work. I don't know. Maybe we could put in a call to Mystery for that one and see what he thinks? I don't know. Months later, in October of 2021, Poe releases his response to Operation Red Tape that tries to paint a different picture, where he says that Gene Yu is actually a real person, that Mr. Stake and Dogecore, the other 2 hackers in the group, orchestrated the July 4th attack originally as a joke, and then just decided to keep going with it, because Wanty, the author of the Red Tape document, prodded them to keep going. Now, this Wanty guy says that he did it just so that he could show how bad these dudes really were. But at this point, honestly, who actually fucking knows? Poe goes on to say that he and Red Shield didn't actually take part in the hack in any way themselves and just wanted the game to be better. And that's why Poe wrote the Medium article. He says he knows who the real Gene Yu is, identified him, got his phone number, called him up on the phone, and confronted him in order to get a recorded confession of the hacking. But of course, because he didn't want to dox Gene Yu, none of this evidence is included in the document he created. He just says that it happened. He then goes on to finger point at several other hackers that pretended to be him but didn't pretend to be Gene Yu, began doxing the hacker group, and the list goes on and on. What I can gather from all of this is that all of these guys involved in this entire hacking plot have all seemingly tried to play this awkward game of coder musical chairs, where they point fingers at each other and attempt to simultaneously be not the bad guy, and say that they were just doing it for science, and to reverse engineer the hacks that the other guys were actually doing it. And no, officer, these guys are the real bad hackers. These are the actual ones. We're the good ones. We swear. Every single person involved in this outside third-party hacking circle jerk are pieces of shit. Seriously. They ended ended up doing what amounted to nothing more than severely scarring the entire Titanfall IP to the point where the likelihood we will ever see another Titanfall game is slim to none, especially considering the success of Apex. Just on the Steam charts alone, Apex is still sitting at daily peaks of over 125,000 concurrent players, and this doesn't account for PS4, Xbox, the EA app, Epic Games, or the Nintendo Switch. The hackers ended up creating a rift in the IP that they all swear they love so much that they drove normal players away in search of other games that don't have these issues. And while you can blame Respawn for having a game that had these problems to begin with, and it could be argued that Respawn drugged their feet, there's no part of me that believes the answer was to take the hacking to the extreme that it was taken to. This document was released after a September 9th patch from Respawn that more or less buttoned up all of the server vulnerabilities, but it didn't fix the DDoS attack issue, which had persisted. That is, until this document got released in October. At some level, there must have been some truth to it, because very, very shortly after this document got released, the DDoS attacks on the game suddenly stopped. Perhaps some of the accusations contained in the response had enough truth to them to scare whoever was actually doing the DDoS attacks to finally stop for fear of being found out for real. Or perhaps they couldn't afford to keep the botnet doing what it was doing. Personally, I'd like to believe that whoever was responsible was finally able to sit back and take a long look at everything that they had been doing and what had been going on since the hacking began back in 2019, and realized that there was just no fucking point to it. Titanfall 1 was dead. They killed it. Titanfall 2's community had developed a third-party client matchmaker called Northstar that had gone around the exploits already, effectively killing the DDoS, as this was a way to have both mods and community-run servers, something that Red Shield had asked for years prior, but the Respawn never directly granted, and this Northstar client's existence was never something Respawn said was okay, but never went after taking down either. And at this point, it had been literal years since this crusade against Respawn had begun. Years of time to forget why you had started doing this silly thing in the first place, and years of time to forget why you had been so angry about it all to begin with. I'd like to believe that whichever one or all of these coders that were involved in Titanfall hacks just grew up and realized it's just a video game and it's not that big of a deal. However, I do think that if there had been a shred of hope that we were going to see Titanfall 3, that this hacking debacle kind of likely killed it. That is, of course, unless the folks at Respawn saw a video like this one and heard from a guy like me that's been playing video games almost daily for the last 35 plus years, who just recently, within the last 2 weeks, finally got around to playing Titanfall 2 for the first time ever, was absolutely enthralled by the IP. Seriously, I couldn't put it down, and is genuinely begging for another one. Bring back the Titans, fellas. Seriously, please. But at least we all know that no matter how bad it was or how sad it is for Titanfall fans out there hoping for another sequel, at least we don't have to deal with the now, thank God, former CEO of Activision. And to paraphrase one of my favorite content creators, Scotty K Fitness, seriously, fuck Bobby Kotick. That guy sucks.